For some it may be cliche, and for others it might be a revelation. But in America we are deceived into being content with ourselves, with our surroundings. People in the world need to wake up and recognize things that are not righteous, not just, and stop thinking or speaking about how things could be better or can be made better, and actually do them. I'm Jerome Long. I'm a geometry teacher at Lakeland High School, and I attend the Rock Church in Rathdrum, Idaho. I'm going to Africa with a team. We are going to be leading worship for different churches in the area. It's kind of an open-ended trip right now as far as what we're doing. We know we'll be leading worship and in general coming against certain things that are issues that exist in Africa still. Some of them are cultural, some of them are just kind of inherently evil that people are either turning a blind eye to or don't know how to speak against. Well, as far as what my particular church has been seeing and facing, there are albino children in Africa, and they are viewed as being spiritually imbued or powerful. And so witch doctors are still very much a real thing in Africa, and I don't know if some people either just think that's kind of fairy tale of witch doctors, or that it doesn't happen anymore, or they aren't real anymore, but they are real, and they do evil practices. So one thing is they take the albino children and use their parts for potions and such things and sell them on the black market. It's very much real, and it very much happens on a regular basis. In an area we won't be going, which is Sudan, children are kidnapped and made to be a part of this warlord's army. There's been a few different people to address the issue. It's about 6 years ago now. It happened when I was in college, and it was just a documentary of these college students that were making it aware of these kids being kidnapped into this warlord's army and forced to kill their parents and such things. So there's certain things like that which we will be keeping an eye out for. Again, it's kind of an open-ended as far as what our itinerary is, other than the fact that we will be leading worship for a few different areas. One thing, the simplest thing, is just to speak against it. Call it out when it's happening. If it requires some physical force or whatnot, it's kind of just going to be in the moment thing. We're not actively fighting this warlord army from kidnapping children, but we're not just going to be passively witnessing something to that effect happen. But in terms of the albino children and the witch doctors, simply calling out the witch doctors for doing what they're doing, and which is truly just an evil, speaking against it and getting people to rise up and just understand that they don't have to just let this happen, and that there's more hope in the world than just selling your child to one of these witch doctors for a few $1,000s, which would equate to, in America, to get by and make a living. Where I'm not necessarily planning or banking on anything happening, I am mentally prepared. Like I said, if I am witnessing, for example, an albino child being actively kidnapped, I most certainly am going to stop that from happening, and as best I can, and however I need to eliminate or mitigate the opposition, I'm willing to do that. It doesn't take some huge organization. Our church is probably 30 strong of regular people to come, but our small group is going to Africa in the name of God to fight for righteousness and fight for what we in America think should be automatic. But for people in Africa and other similar countries, continents, their normal is, hey, my kid didn't get kidnapped today, yay, or things to that effect. Naturally, I'm a servant and I'm a protector. I was a police officer before this. I knew I always wanted to be a teacher. So I've always loved people. It hasn't fully hit me, I think. Just a wake-up call, hopefully. And this isn't anywhere near as deep as everything that's really going on, this interview, and what I can speak on right now, but there's a huge paradigm shift that's needed in our American perspective of ourselves and the rest of the world. I went to Dar es Salaam. That's where we flew into, which is in Tanzania. And then we went to some surrounding villages around Dar es Salaam. And then we traveled west, clear across the country to our village where we have a relationship with, and they're on Lake Tanganyika. Starting in Dar es Salaam, very, very modernized, kind of big city feel, lots of people. The further we traveled west to our village, the more basic you see life become. There's actually a lot of villages on the way that would never show up on the map, just really small little communities that driving by, you kind of look and be like, how are they living out here? They got crops, we saw their farms and stuff, but for some places there was no clear, like from the road, body of water that they, lived off of. Some people have wells or stuff, other people have to walk miles and miles, and usually the young kids with 5-gallon buckets on their heads, and that's just how they live. It's very simple. They don't need a whole bunch of shops and businesses to thrive. They just live off the land and are content. So once we got to our village, it's on the lake, and it's you can't really see across all the way across depending on where you're at, and it looks like an ocean, and it was very beautiful out there. So we stayed in a town just south of Dar es Salaam called Mwendege, which there's a YWAM base, and YWAM is Youth with a Mission, and so it's a Christian base.
Youth with a Mission. This is their school. There's the lunchroom.
They're pretty much established there as outreach. They have a health clinic, which the surrounding communities go to, and they also have a primary school. We stayed there for about a week and a half, so we got to establish pretty good relationships with them. A variety of church leaders from different tribes, but a lot of love from a lot of the people, and there's a certain innocence about the African people in general that's just kind of blatant and really out there that you don't really feel that as much in America. Lots of children. They range from any kind of way you can classify children here in America. Really sweet, really nice, kind of wanted to see what you're like.
And there's some African children. They're just hanging out.
Primary thing was we led worship in different churches in the area with the message that we were bringing, which is once you become a believer in Jesus Christ and God the Father, that it's no longer about what earthly cultures we have. And, the American culture, Tanzanian, African culture, whatever culture you're a part of, sure, there's some good things about the culture, but then there's also bad things that you can't necessarily hold on to just because it's your culture. Because God has his own culture that we are called to rise up to. And when we are in that culture, then it doesn't matter if I'm here in America, they're there in Africa, or somebody in Germany or wherever. we're all one family. So that's the message we were bringing in the beginning of changing some of the cultural things, like how they're not just going to necessarily leave children without any resources at all. But for example, if a child is an orphan, there might not be anybody who really cares to truly take them in and make sure that they don't die. Pastor Brendan had met a kid in such a situation, took him to a church nearby, kind of reproved them a little bit because he was an orphan and homeless right in this area of this church, and they knew about him, and they were doing nothing at the time. And so they brought him in. They fed him. He was just pretty much malnourished. But after a time, and after Brendan had not gone back for a time, they kind of just put him to the wayside again, and he died. So that's, again, some of the things culturally that, for them it's survival of the fittest, and nobody really steps up to do what's really right. We didn't get to go to the location where the albino children were being fostered, but I did get to see personally a few albino children out in the streets. And sadly, one of the times we were on our way to lead worship at a church, and we had to take the back roads because the main road was flooded. So we were driving through the back roads and through the neighborhoods, and it's a bumpy ride, and it's tight corners, and we're almost there, and I see this albino girl and her Muslim schoolmates with her. She might have been 11 or 12, but I got really excited, and I was sitting in the front seat, and our driver was not a driver associated with the church. They just kind of hired him off the street. And so I'm thinking he's understanding that I'm seeing her, and I'm kind of excited, and I maybe want to get out and talk to her. But I had a couple of my group in the back, and from their perspective, they realized that the driver was actually acting like he was going to pin the girl on the building with his car, like messing with her and scaring her. That just goes to show the mentality. It's a child. It's a child. It doesn't matter if they're albino or black or orphan or parents or whatever. It just destroyed me after the fact. I didn't realize that. One of the final days at the conference that we were at in Morogoro, Brendan got to speak, and pretty much all he did was share his testimony. So to preface that, the African people as a whole tend to think anybody coming from America, particularly anybody who's white, is rich. For the difference in what our money's value is, it argumentatively could put up a small fight, but they don't really perceive us as going through particular struggles. Some of the struggles that Brendan has gone through in his life, and even here, and how he's had to live without power, without heat, without water at night, having to cuddle up next to his dog to stay warm, type of things. And it's just, that's, and anywhere you go, that's going to be like, dang, you went through that. But to see the African people react to that in just tears and almost disbelief was incredible.
Wow.
We were able to have a couple fun days, and able to interact with some of the locals and play soccer, and played a couple different soccer drill games, and try to speak some Swahili to them. They try to speak some English to us, and there's too many different encounters to really give you a good nutshell version of it. But for as different as our worlds are in our different countries and continents, to be able to break down the misconceptions or whatnot on both parts, there's definitely an impact. And the goal is eventually, with what we want to establish within the village with Kapili, one goal is to be able to bring students from here over there. Because one thing we want to get established over there is a kind of youth center. They already have a secondary school, but extra support for academics and education. Nobody here has to walk multiple miles with 5-gallon bucket
fill it with water, and walk 5 miles back and go about their day every day and be content. And they are content out there for the most part, especially out in the villages away from the city.
Say hi.
Just seeing the simplicity of life out there. And from what I saw, for lack of, if there's an area that's war-stricken, we would say they're in poverty by our standards, but I don't think they see themselves as impoverished. Every place that we went, by the end of it, it was just like those people were really family.
People in the world need to wake up and recognize things that are not righteous, not just, and stop thinking or speaking about how things could be better or can be made better, and actually do them.